In August of 1994, Toadies unleashed Rubberneck, a dark debut album that became one of Texas's most significant rock releases of the decade in the alternative scene. Initially overlooked, this collection of dark narratives and jagged riffs slowly built momentum until achieving platinum status 2 years after its release. The album, born out of frontman Vaden Todd Lewis's personal experiences, as well as his dreams, were shaped in a remote California studio. The album's raw energy tackled themes of stalkers, serial killers, religious rebellion, as well as dark obsession, and it created a captivating atmosphere. In today's video, let's talk about Toadies' album Rubberneck. Toadies' history dates back to the record store Sound Warehouse, where all the four members worked together in Fort Worth, Texas. Frontman and guitarist Vaden Todd Lewis told Blur Online that he grew tired of playing in cover bands, including one called Gunga Din, that did Echo and the Bunnymen and the Cure tunes. While he could make decent money playing covers, he didn't feel like he was going to ever grow artistically. Also working with Lewis was bassist Lisa Umbarger, as well as guitarist Charles Mooney and drummer Guy Vaughn. Vaughn and Lewis had previously played together in several bands. It was Lewis who called up Vaughn, with the drummer recalling, "He called me one day and said he had a vision for a new band and wanted me, Lisa, and Charles to be part of it. When I heard the songs, I thought, this guy really has got something." But Vaughn and Mooney, interestingly enough, didn't know how to play instruments, but Lewis offered to teach them, and it took him about 2 months to teach him how to play. The band in their early days struggled to keep a drummer though, and they did end up going through several lineup changes. And the band became a frequent presence at local Fort Worth club Axis, but shortly after the club closed, so did Fort Worth's music scene. The band soon shifted to playing in nearby Dallas, and they purposely didn't tell club owners that they were from Fort Worth, claiming that if they did find out, they probably wouldn't have gotten gigs. It was in 1989 the group released a self-published EP, and then they started selling their first 2-song cassette featuring the tracks Dig a Hole and I Hope You Die. There was even a short period of time where Toadies t-shirts reading I Hope You Die became taboo at local schools. Charles Mooney, though, ended up quitting the group in 1993. He got married, he finished college, and felt pressure from his family to get a real job. He ended up leaving the group and became a customer service manager at Bank of America in Fort Worth. Daryl Herbert took over on lead guitar, and it wasn't long after they started getting label attention. The small indie label Grass Records put out the group's EP Pleather in 1993. According to Billboard, the EP sold around 1,400 copies, and it was enough of a success that Grass now wanted a full LP from Toadies. But the band purposely held back some of their songs, waiting to sign a major label deal. It was an A&R guy from Interscope named Ray Santamaria who heard the group's EP and flew out to see them at a place called Mad Hatter's. Santa Maria, though, wasn't in a position of power to sign them right away. He figured that if he could get the band to book a gig in Los Angeles, he could get more people from Interscope to check them out. Herbert recalled pestering the only club that he knew in LA, which was the Whiskey A Go-Go, who ended up booking Toadies in the middle of the week. The band traveled from Texas in a U-Haul trailer, hauling all their equipment and driving the day before to Los Angeles. Ted Field, who owned Interscope, saw the band and signed them on the spot. Toadies soon turned their attention to working on what would be their major label debut, Rubberneck, enlisting Tom Rothrock and Rob Schnaff, who worked with the likes of Beck and Foo Fighters. But it was the producer's work with a punk band, Wool, that really convinced them to choose the pair. Most of the songs on Pleather ended up making their way onto Rubberneck, and Toadies and their producers ended up retreating to a secluded studio in Mendocino, California. It was a pretty boring place, there wasn't much to do, so Toadies broke up the boredom by smoking pot, shooting guns, and playing good old Street Fighter. The band spent most of their advance on, of course, recording the new album, in addition to buying music equipment, cars, and beer. The opening number off the album, Mexican Hairless, is an instrumental number, something that didn't really sit well with their label. Their rep from their label told the group that they were concerned that if people would buy the record, they would hear no words on the first song, think the whole album is like that, and then return it. But the band got their way in the end. One of the songs featured on the album also became the band's signature tune. I'm of course talking about Possum Kingdom. The song has a pretty dark backstory, and many people have misunderstood it or misinterpreted it. The inspiration came from Lewis's own imagination, his love of horror movies, and just creepy stories that he heard as a kid. The song is set in the Texas park Possum Kingdom in Palo Pinto County, Texas. It was a place that Lewis visited quite frequently with his family when he was younger. The song covers the themes of unrequited love, loneliness, and despair, with him claiming that he heard a lot of weird and creepy stories. Lewis revealed about the song to Songfacts, the story Possum Kingdom starts with the story of a guy lured by a girl into a dark underworld. He's kind of attracted to a girl, and she invites him to this crazy party that's basically a cult. For years, people assumed that the song was about a real-life serial killer, and Texas Monthly discussed one theory about the song that lingered for quite a while, writing, "In 1994, a killer was said to roam the craggy shores of Possum Kingdom Lake. As the story goes, the prowler, presumed to be a man, approached a young woman one night, making overtures of romantic flattery. He invited her to walk with him around the lake. He lured her to behind a boathouse, and it was there that he revealed his true intentions." But the story seemed to live on for years, when in reality the song was born out of Lewis's imagination. If you also notice in the quote that I just mentioned, Lewis kind of indicates the serial killer was in fact a woman, but there's been several other interviews where he refers to the serial killer as a guy. Now, this next part may surprise you. The band didn't want to release the song on the album. Lisa Umbarger told FortWorthTexas.com, "We didn't want that song on there at all. We fought the label on it, and they came back and said, the song is one of the reasons we signed you." As the band saw it, they'd already released the track and their fans had already heard it, so there was no reason to re-release it. Lewis added, "In retrospect, I did everything I could to not make that a radio song. I wrote it without a chorus. I never say the name of the song. To me, that's a very self-defeatist approach to a hit song." The track was set to be a continuation of the closing number on Rubberneck, I Burn, which tells the story of cult members who immolate themselves to reach a higher level of existence. Lewis wanted to continue the story of a male character who realized that the ritual was for nothing, and came up with the idea of this male character going to Possum Kingdom to try and recruit a new cult member. Possum Kingdom wasn't the only creepy song, as Tyler was inspired by the folklore of a stalker in, well, Tyler, Texas. Lewis recalled, "I was down there for Thanksgiving, and after the family got through talking about who's died and who's got cancer and all those things the families talk about, they started talking about this guy who was peeping in windows and started breaking into people's houses. He'd go out of his way to be seen, and everyone is like armed to the teeth, and he's tapping on windows." The whole family was freaked out about it. The artwork for their major label debut was commissioned from a student who attended the University of North Texas. The original artwork was pitched to be a woman kneeling in front of a burning house, since there were several songs on the record that dealt with fire. But instead, the band chose an image of a man leaping, inspired by artist Robert Longo and his Men in Cities series, in addition to a 1951 series called Mysterious Island. Like Possum Kingdom, the rest of the album featured dark subject matter, which was attributed to Lewis's upbringing, which saw him have a Baptist minister father. He told Billboard, "I'm not really rebelling against that. I got over that when I was 16, but it's more about looking back at what shapes your thinking, about what twisted things were put on you as a little kid, like the whole thing about worrying, dying, and going to hell." The run-up to the release of the album was difficult, though. The band felt like Interscope wasn't really taking them seriously, as their album had initially been held back from being released because Interscope had more important acts as they saw it, who should have bigger priority over when to choose to put out their records. The band was also well aware that they were probably going to lose their recording contract if the album didn't perform well. But as Lewis saw it, he wanted to get away with what he could do, and worst case, he would just go back to working at his regular job. In fact, he was so confident that he was going to lose his recording contract, he told his boss at the record store that he'd probably be back in a year. Released in August of '94, Interscope just didn't seem that interested in promoting Toadies' debut record. The label was busy dealing with the success of Bush, Marilyn Manson, and Nine Inch Nails. In fact, the first two singles barely made a mark, while the third single, which proved to be the band's breakout hit, was almost never released. By August of '94, Lewis told the Austin American-Statesman that he wished now that the band had released a few more independent records before signing a major label deal. Umbarger told the same paper, "Lots of promises have been made and then broken. Money that we were supposed to get to push the record ended up going to other bands." It was pretty bleak coming from the band considering their album had just been released. Toadies ended up on the road supporting label mates Bush, and even though the tour was a good opportunity to get themselves in front of audiences who weren't familiar with them, it didn't prove to be enjoyable. For starters, the band didn't really get along with the members of Bush. They weren't happy that there were really no days off on the tour, and they didn't really like playing bigger venues, feeling too separated from their fans. By Christmas of '94, the band was considering calling it a day and quitting music and just going back to their day jobs. But a year later, the album went gold. So what happened? Lewis told the LA Times, "We were doing everything we could and the label kept pushing things back and changing things around. So we were ready to move on and work with somebody else." The band owed a lot of their success to a radio station in Tampa, WXTB, who added Possum Kingdom by the end of '94. Soon enough, other radio stations followed suit, including WAAF in Boston, and the music video for Possum Kingdom was soon added to MTV's Buzzbin. Following the success of the third single, stations wanted another song, so they started playing "I Come From the Water," but it was never released as a single. The song was one of actually the first songs Lewis had ever written, and it was written about a man who's extremely religious but still believes in evolution. By 1996, Rubberneck went platinum, selling 1 million copies, but the band's follow-up was a much more painful process. Lineup changes, legal issues, and not writing songs while they were on the road resulted in a very drawn-out process for their follow-up release. Couple this with the fact that once the album was finished, Interscope flat-out rejected it. Toadies took 7 years to release their follow-up record, Hell Below, Stars Above. 5 months after the record's release, the band announced its split. Lewis looked back, stating, "It seemed like negativity was swirling all around us, and ultimately we decided it wasn't worth dealing with." The band did end up reuniting in 2006 and has since released several new albums in addition to touring. Possum Kingdom, you guys probably remember, got a new lease on life when it was included in the video games Guitar Hero and Rock Band when it was released as DLC. Do you wanna be my angel? For a brief period of time in the mid-90s, other groups from Texas besides the Toadies were also getting national exposure, like Deep Blue Something and Tripping Daisy. So let me know your thoughts on Rubberneck in the comment section below, guys, and what your thoughts are on Toadies. We'll see you again on a Rock and Roll True Story sticker.